It wasn't a single loud event that signaled the beginning of the end. It was the silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that settled over our 15-year marriage like a thick fog. David, the man whose laughter once filled every corner of our home, had become a ghost at his own dinner table. He'd come home late, smelling of a sterile office and stale coffee, his shoulders hunched under the weight of a world he refused to share with me. "Work is just a lot right now, Em," he'd murmur, avoiding my eyes. "The whole market is down. We just have to be careful for a while." I wanted to believe him. For months, I did. I was his wife, his partner. We had built a life, a home, and a beautiful daughter, Lily, on a foundation of trust. So I did what he asked. I became careful. I clipped coupons until my fingers were sore. I started turning down lunch invitations from friends, and I learned to mend Lily's clothes instead of buying new ones. The savings account we had so proudly named Future Dreams became the well we dipped into for groceries, for the mortgage, for the electric bill. I watched its balance shrink with a growing knot of dread in my stomach, but every time I tried to talk to David about it, he'd put up a wall. "I'm handling it, Emily. Please, just trust me." But trust needs something to hold on to. It starves in a vacuum of secrets. The man I loved was still there, in flashes. In the way he'd look at Lily, his eyes softening with a love so fierce it was breathtaking. Or in a quiet moment when he'd reach for my hand across the couch, his touch a fleeting reminder of the connection we once had. But these moments became rarer, islands in a vast ocean of distance. The strain was beginning to show on our daughter. Lily, at 10 years old, was perceptive and bright. She didn't miss the tension that crackled in the air. She'd stopped asking for things. The new art set she wanted. The trip to the water park her friends were all talking about. Instead, she'd watch us, her young face etched with a worry that no child should ever have to carry. One evening, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her homework spread out before her, though she wasn't writing. She was just staring at a colorful flyer. "What's that, sweetie?" I asked, my voice gentle. She pushed it towards me. It was for a school field trip to the Science Museum. "It's probably too much money, right, Mom?" she asked, her voice small. "It's okay, I don't have to go." My heart fractured. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the joy being leached from our lives, the quiet sacrifices my daughter felt she had to make. That night, after Lily was in bed, I approached David again. "David, we need to talk. Really talk. Lily is giving up on things she loves because she's worried about money. I can't do this in the dark anymore. What is happening?" He sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion as he rubbed his temples. "It's just a bad quarter, Em. I told you. It'll get better. I promise." He stood up and kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt more like a dismissal than affection. "I'm going to bed." As I stood alone in the quiet living room, surrounded by the shadows of the life we had built, I knew I couldn't accept his empty promises any longer. The foundation of trust had crumbled, and a cold, terrifying suspicion was beginning to take its place. He wasn't just being careful. He was hiding something. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had to find out what it was. The next few days were a quiet agony. I went through the motions of our life, but my mind was a whirlwind of suspicion. Every time David's phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of anxiety. Every time he closed his laptop lid when I walked into the room, my stomach tightened. I started paying closer attention to the mail, sifting through the bills and junk mail before he got home, looking for something. I didn't even know what I was searching for, but the feeling that I was being deceived was a constant, bitter taste in my mouth. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Lily. She was working on a school project about family budgeting. A part of the assignment was to interview her parents about how they manage household expenses. Her innocent questions felt like tiny daggers. "So, Dad, where does our money go?" she asked one evening, her pencil poised over a worksheet. David gave a strained smile. "Well, sweetheart, it goes to the house, to the food we eat, to the car, the important things." "Do we have a savings account?" she pressed, reading the next question on her list. "Yes, we do," David said, his eyes flicking towards me for a fraction of a second. "It's very important to save." Later that night, after David was asleep, his words echoed in my head. "Yes, we do." He'd spoken of it in the present tense, yet our Future Dreams account was practically empty. Was it just a slip of the tongue, or was there another account? A place where the money he claimed was lost was actually accumulating? The thought was so monstrous, so contrary to the man I thought I had married, that I almost dismissed it. But I couldn't. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing into a thorny vine, wrapping itself around my heart. I knew I had to access our online banking portal. We had set it up together years ago, but David was always the one who managed it. He was the numbers guy, he'd said with a wink. Now it felt less like a division of labor and more like a deliberate exclusion. My hands trembled as I sat at my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dark. I typed in the web address for our bank, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt like a spy in my own home. I guessed the password, a combination of our anniversary and Lily's birthday. It worked. I held my breath and clicked on the account summary. And there it was. Our joint checking account, its balance distressingly low. Our joint savings account, the Future Dreams Fund, with less than $100 in it. And then, a third line item, D. Henderson, personal savings. I clicked on it. The screen loaded, and the number that appeared made the air leave my lungs in a painful rush. It was a six-figure sum, a sum that could have paid off our mortgage, sent Lily to college, and given us the security David claimed had vanished. I scrolled through the transaction history. For over a year, regular, substantial transfers were made from his paycheck directly into this hidden account, while our shared funds were left to wither and die. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just about money. This was a betrayal of the deepest kind. He had been slowly starving our shared life, feeding a secret one of his own. The careful budgets, the clipped coupons, my own mounting anxiety. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed charade to hide his deception. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm into our bedroom, wake him up, and demand an explanation. But what would that accomplish? He would just deny it, lie more, and find a way to twist the situation. No, I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. My eyes fell on the printer in the corner of the room. If I printed the statements from my laptop, he would see the print history. He would know I had been digging. But then, an idea sparked, born from Lily's innocent school project. The next morning, as Lily was getting ready for school, I approached her. "Sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have a really important grown-up task that I need your help with. You know how you're always so good with the computers at school?" She puffed up her chest with pride. "Yeah. Well, I need some important papers printed, but our printer is acting up. Could you possibly print them for me at the school library today? I can email you the file." "Sure, Mom. What is it?" I took a deep breath. "It's just some boring bank stuff for your family budget project. It will help you with your report." I wrote down the login information for the bank website on a slip of paper. "Just log in here, go to the account that says personal savings, and print the last 12 months of statements for me." I handed her the slip of paper and a $20 bill. "This is for the printing and a little extra for a snack. This is our little secret, okay? It will be a surprise for Dad to show him how responsible we're being." She nodded enthusiastically, her eyes bright with the thrill of being entrusted with a secret mission. As I watched her walk out the door, her backpack filled with books and the evidence of her father's betrayal, I felt a strange mix of guilt and resolve. My little girl was about to uncover the secret that would tear our family apart, but it was the only way to finally bring the truth into the light. The school day stretched before me like a desolate, arid landscape. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall was a fresh grain of sand hitting my raw nerves, a relentless reminder of the confrontation that loomed. I felt a profound, cavernous guilt for placing Lily in the middle of this domestic espionage. I had taken her innocence, a precious, fragile thing, and tainted it with our ugly adult problems. I had turned my daughter into an unwilling accomplice in the slow, deliberate dismantling of her own family. The thought was a physical weight, a stone pressing down on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. Yet underneath the crushing guilt, a harder, colder emotion was crystallizing into something sharp and unyielding. Resolve. The woman who clipped coupons, who managed the household budget with cheerful frugality, the woman who accepted vague reassurances and placating smiles, was gone. In her place was a woman who required the truth, no matter how devastating its impact. I tried to lose myself in activity. I cleaned the house with a frantic, almost manic energy, scrubbing floors as if I could somehow erase the grime of David's lies from the very foundation of our home. I tore through closets, sorting through the accumulated detritus of our shared past. The faded concert t-shirts from our college days, the kitschy souvenirs from a dozen vacations, the tangible memories of a life I no longer recognized. With every photo album I dusted, with every piece of his clothing I folded, a single, tormenting question echoed in the silent, empty house. Why? Why risk everything we had built? Why betray the trust that had been the bedrock of our marriage? When the familiar, wheezing rumble of the school bus echoed down the street, my heart leaped into my throat, a frantic bird trapped in my ribs. I stood at the window, a spy in my own home, watching Lily hop down the bus steps. Her bright pink backpack, adorned with a smiling cartoon unicorn, was a stark, almost painful contrast to the gray dread that had settled over me like a shroud. She walked up the path, her small shoulders squared with a seriousness that didn't belong on a 9-year-old. I pulled the door open before she could even reach for her key. Her face was a miniature mask of adult gravity. "I got them, Mom," she said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper that sliced right through me. She pulled a thick, deceptively ordinary manila envelope from her backpack. She handed it to me, and the weight of the paper felt immense, disproportionate, like a stack of legal documents sealing our fate. "Thank you, sweetie," I said, my voice hoarse and strained. I forced a smile that felt like a grimace. "You were a huge, huge help. Now go get started on your homework. I'll make us a special snack in a bit. Your favorite." She seemed instantly relieved to be dismissed, to shed the heavy cloak of our secret. I watched her go, a little soldier retreating from the battlefield, and the guilt returned with a fresh, sharp pang. I took the envelope into the kitchen and sat at the very table where Lily had first shown me the field trip flyer, the place where this final, painful chapter had begun. My hands trembled as I undid the metal clasp. The statements were crisp and official, printed in the unforgiving, sterile black and white of a bank's ledger. I spread them out across the table, a timeline of deceit. The transfers were just as I had seen them on the dim screen of his laptop, methodical, relentless, clinical. A significant portion of his salary, diverted every 2 weeks into his secret hoard. But as my eyes scanned the columns, tracing the flow of money, I saw something else. Something I had missed in my panicked, frantic late-night search. There weren't just deposits, there were withdrawals. Large, regular payments to a name I'd never seen before. Clearwater Holdings, LLC. They were for thousands of dollars at a time, occurring monthly. A steady, rhythmic bleed. A new icy dread trickled down my spine, colder and more terrifying than my initial discovery. This wasn't just a secret savings account, a nest egg for a private fantasy. This was active. This was a secret life. What was Clearwater Holdings? The name was sterile, corporate, but it could hide anything. Another woman? A secret second family? A crippling gambling debt? The possibilities were dizzying, a carousel of horrors spinning in my mind, each one more painful than the last. He wasn't just hoarding money, he was spending it. He had been bleeding our family dry to fund a completely separate, hidden existence. When David came home that evening, the air in the house was thick with my unspoken accusations. I had hidden the statements, but the knowledge of them was a palpable presence in the room, a third person sitting at our dinner table. I managed to feign normalcy through the meal, a performance for Lily's sake. We talked about her day, about a spelling test she'd aced, about a funny thing the dog did. It was a grotesque parody of domestic harmony, and the effort it took to smile, to pass the salt, to pretend that my world hadn't been shattered into a million irreparable pieces, was monumental. David, to his credit, was not oblivious. He seemed to sense the shift in me, the new brittle edge in my voice. "You're quiet tonight," he said as we cleared the dishes together, his voice cautious, probing. "Just tired," I replied, my own voice flat and lifeless. After Lily was tucked into bed, her sweet, innocent face in the dim light of her nightlight a painful reminder of everything that was at stake, I knew the charade had to end. I walked back into the living room where David was scrolling through his phone, a perfect picture of relaxed, domestic bliss that was utterly, poisonously false. I didn't speak at first. I let the silence hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. I walked to the sideboard, retrieved the manila envelope, and laid the printed statements on the coffee table in front of him. I didn't toss them. I placed them there, deliberately, one by one, like laying cards on a gaming table. He looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed in mild, questioning confusion. Then his eyes registered the bank logo at the top of the pages. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. His gaze darted from the papers to my face, and in my eyes he must have seen the absolute final end of his lies. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, before he finally spoke, his voice a ragged whisper. "Emily, I can explain." I crossed my arms, my body a statue of cold, contained fury. "Can you?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Can you explain why you've been siphoning money from our family for over a year? Can you explain why our future dreams are gone while you've been building a secret fortune?" "And David," I said, leaning forward, my voice dropping even lower, each word a carefully aimed dart. "Who or what is Clearwater Holdings?" He flinched as if I had physically slapped him. The last vestige of defiance went out of his eyes, replaced by a look of utter, soul-crushing defeat. He stared at the papers, at the undeniable black and white evidence of his betrayal laid bare. He opened his mouth, then closed it, shaking his head slowly. "It's not what you think," he finally choked out, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't decipher. It wasn't anger or fear, but something closer to despair. It wasn't for me. It was for my brother. The name hung in the air between us, heavy and entirely unexpected. My brother. Two words that didn't fit the narrative I had spent weeks constructing in my mind. The image of a secret lover, of a hidden, glamorous life, shattered into 1,000 pieces, replaced by the pathetic, troubled face of his younger brother, Michael. My first reaction was a wave of cynical disbelief, a desperate attempt to cling to the simpler, albeit more painful story of infidelity. "Your brother?" I asked, my voice laced with a bitter sarcasm. "David. Michael has been a mess for years. We both know that, but he's not a six-figure secret. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. I'm done with lies." "I'm not lying," he insisted, his voice cracking with an earnestness that was hard to ignore. He finally looked up at me, and for the first time that night, I saw not a deceitful husband, but a man utterly broken and cornered by his own choices. "I wish I were. It would be easier to explain." He took a ragged breath. "Michael. He has a gambling addiction, Emily. A real one. A sickness. It started with online poker a couple of years ago, just small amounts, he said. But it spiraled. He took out loans from the wrong kind of people. People who don't use contracts and courts." He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, heaving sobs. "Clearwater Holdings isn't a real company. It's a shell, a collections agency for a loan shark. Michael called me about a year ago, in the middle of the night. I've never heard him sound like that. He was sobbing, incoherent. He said he owed them so much. And they were done waiting. They sent 2 men to his apartment M. They didn't touch him. They just sat on his couch and told him in very specific detail what would happen to his kneecaps if he didn't start paying. They knew where he worked. They knew where I worked. They knew Lily's name." He stopped, choking on the memory. I didn't know what to do. My first thought was, I have to tell Emily. But I knew what you'd say. You'd say we couldn't afford it, that we had to go to the police, that Michael had to face the consequences of his actions. And you would have been right. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. You would have been the strong one, the sensible one. And I couldn't be. He's my little brother. I remembered him as a kid, following me around everywhere. All I could see was his face, and all I could hear were their threats. I was weak, and I was scared. So I paid them. Every word felt like a stone being methodically added to the crushing weight on my chest. The white-hot anger was still there, a burning coal in my gut, but it was now mingled with a confusing, unwelcome surge of pity. This wasn't a betrayal born of greed or lust. It was born of fear and a misguided familial love. He hadn't been funding a secret affair or a lavish lifestyle for himself. He had been trying to save his brother in the most secretive, stupid, and destructive way imaginable. He hadn't betrayed our marriage vows, but he had betrayed the very essence of our partnership. He had made a unilateral decision to set our family on fire to keep his brother warm. "So you lied," I said, the words coming out flat and hollow as the reality settled in. "For over a year, you chose to lie to me every single day. You came home and kissed me. You sat across from me at this very table. And you lied. You watched me clip coupons until my fingers were raw. You watched me tell Lily, our daughter, that she couldn't go on a school trip because money was tight. You let me live in a constant, gnawing state of fear and anxiety, all while you were playing the secret savior, sending thousands of dollars to a criminal. I was trying to protect you," he argued weakly, the words sounding hollow even to him. "No," I shot back, my voice rising with all the frustration and pain I had suppressed. "Stop saying that. You were trying to protect yourself from the fight you knew we would have, from the difficult choices we would have had to make together, from looking weak in front of your wife. That's the part I can't forgive, David. It was never just about the money. It was that you decided my opinion, my strength, my partnership was worthless. You faced this alone, and in doing so, you left me completely alone, isolated in the dark with a completely different set of fears. Your lies were a deeper rot than your brother's debt ever could be." The truth of my words hit him with the force of a physical blow. He slumped back into the couch, all the air going out of him, leaving only a hollowed-out man. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't tense and suspicious. It was desolate, the profound quiet that follows a devastating storm, the silence that allows you to finally see the full extent of the wreckage. I thought of Lily, sleeping peacefully in her bed, blissfully unaware that her world had been fractured and clumsily glued back together in the space of a single evening. I thought of our 15 years, of the inside jokes, the shared laughter, the quiet moments of effortless comfort, the life we had so carefully built. It wasn't all a lie, but it was now broken, perhaps irreparably. What happens now? He whispered into the void, his voice barely audible. I sank into the armchair opposite him, the pile of bank statements spread on the coffee table between us like the debris of a wreck. I don't know, I admitted, my voice trembling for the first time, the adrenaline of the confrontation giving way to a bone-deep weariness. You don't get to fix this with a single tearful confession, David. It doesn't work that way. The trust isn't just broken. It's been pulverized. We can't just go back to the way things were. I took a deep breath. The path forward foggy and treacherous, but with a single point of light to aim for. First thing tomorrow, you are going to call your brother. You are going to tell him that the bank is closed. There is no more money. None. We will help him find a real therapist, a support group, a certified rehabilitation facility. We will support him in getting better. But we will not enable his addiction or pay off his thugs. He has to face this. That's non-negotiable. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. And then, you and I are going into counseling. We are going to find someone, and we are going to lay all of this out. The lies, the money, the fear, the betrayal, everything. We are going to sit in a room with a stranger and see if there is anything left worth saving. It wasn't a promise of forgiveness, and it was a million miles from a guarantee of a future. It was just a chance. A slim, painful, and brutally difficult chance. He nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face again, a silent, humble agreement. I reached across the table and placed my hand on top of the printed statements. They were no longer just evidence of a betrayal, but a roadmap of our crisis. It was a crisis born from a terrible secret, but if we were to survive it, it would have to be through a brutal, unflinching honesty. The road ahead was uncertain, shrouded in fog, but for the first time in a very long time, there were no more secrets lurking in the dark. Sometimes the deepest wounds are inflicted not by a lack of love, but by a lack of courage. The secrets we keep to protect the ones we love often end up building walls between us, stone by painful stone. True partnership is not about facing problems for someone, but about facing them together, sharing not just the joys, but the burdens too. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a message of hope or the strength to bring a difficult truth into the light.